Okay, thank you very much, Ian. Well, Ian certainly made my job easier today, so I can relax a bit more and enjoy it, as I hope all of you will as well. I've made a few notes, which started about 8:30 last night. But first of all, I would like to thank you all for coming. You know, what a lovely day, lovely venue. And I know so many of you have travelled a long way to get here. And I really appreciate it and humbled, you know, by your response. Absolutely amazing. Ian has covered a bit about the mobiles, etc., so I went straight on to the aim of this event. Well, what we want to do is to, I quote from one of this here, is to provide knowledge and awareness for those with electrosensitivity and associated conditions, such as ME, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, multi-chemical sensitivities, autism. The list could go on and on. The day will be largely focused towards the effect on the young, conception, pregnancies, but not entirely. Yeah, there seems to be this thread running through all these conditions. It may not be the overriding factor that caused it, but it may be a contributory factor along the route. It's also the aim is to inform the wider community, especially for those with a duty of care.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, but we cannot hear properly at the back.
It's very quiet. I don't know if the microphone is working, but it's very quiet at the back here. We're just about to hear you.
Is that better?
That's better, yeah.
Oh, sorry about that. You should have said so to start with. Do you want me to start again? No, please not. Yeah, like I said, thinking of those lines, some of you may have been to talks that I give, because I do talk to various groups, and you'll be very pleased to hear that I'm not talking at length today. So, great, you say. Okay. Yes, to inform the wider community, and I think, quite honestly, that with an event like this, it's not always for the number of people that actually turn up on the day. It is an excellent opportunity to get it out in society. You know, go and see people who you wouldn't normally do, call them up and tell them about it. So it's spreading the word as much as humanly possible. And it's also to promote precaution when using the systems which we do have. There's certain things that we can do which don't really cost a penny, but wise words, which probably Dr. Trester will be talking about later this afternoon. And also to encourage the development of safer devices. The more of us who know about this, the more we can write to our MPs, get it out in the open. Because how it is at the moment, because they don't need to develop safer devices, they're concentrating just on more and more and more, getting it in here, there and anywhere, without concentrating on the safety factor, which I feel has been so lacking with this. And the more awareness we can raise, the more they're likely to do that. That's the aim of the event. Myself, well, Ian has actually covered it. I'm an active supporter of the charity Electrosensitivity UK. I'm in touch with people all over the country on this issue, and I give talks on the subject.
It's now a great pleasure to introduce our first main speaker. Now, Barry's going to speak for up until 1 o'clock, but we're going to take a short natural break around 12 o'clock for a few minutes in case you've got some particular things to deal with. Barry likes to be described as a retired military specialist involved in all aspects of microwave warfare. He's got a physics degree, he's got a research degree, and his career, spanning many decades, has been involved in various aspects to do with microwave warfare. He's the author of the Tetra Report, which was commissioned by the Police Federation. You might recall that Caroline Lucas, the Green MP, opposed more Tetra masts in this country. He's also the author of a new report on the chronic risks of close Wi-Fi exposure to children in our schools. Although the UK is attempting to put more Wi-Fi in schools, not all countries are doing that, as other speakers will tell you. Barrie brings decades of insider knowledge and expertise on the health issues underlying the Wi-Fi technology that we're using and being exposed to. And what really strikes me about him is that he's absolutely independent. So you may want to reinforce my comment here. You've not accepted money from anybody or any organisation, is that true?
I do not accept money, I do not accept gifts of any sort.
Which is absolutely brilliant. So here we have a really valuable resource, somebody who's actually independent of all the different political lobbying groups. And Peter Gain was saying to me, because Barry's reported his conversation with Dr. Trower. Peter says, Barrie, you're working night and day on this. How can you continue working so intensely on these important issues? And Barrie replied, knowing what I do, Peter, I must continue for as long as I can. So it's a great privilege for us to have him here. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Barrie Trower.
I don't actually think I'm a doctor, but 2 years ago, I had a telephone call from the chair of the Irish Doctors Association. And he said, would you come and talk to our annual conference? And would you be very, very specific? He said, I want you to talk about miscarriages, stillbirths, and genetically damaged children. And I said, okay. So I went over to Ireland at the appointed time. I spoke for several hours. In fact, the actual questions went on from the Saturday afternoon when I spoke into the whole of the evening and then all through the following Sunday. And at the end of this, the doctors said, would you please put what you have just said into a report that we can actually reference and take to court or do whatever we want. Excuse me. I said, okay. So I wrote the report. It appeared, I wrote the report for the doctors. It appeared in the following magazine, in the Science Journal. But the picture in the Science Journal, if you want a copy of the article that I wrote, the picture in the journal, it's with a Russian scientist as well. It isn't all my work here. The picture's very small and black and white. If you want the full referenced article, the full colour picture of the main anatomical structures and what goes on, it's on a website, and I've put the website up there. Following its publication and everything else, I was invited to give the first reading at the United States with Professor Martin Paul. He wanted to share the platform with me and wanted me to read it over in the States. Following that, I was invited to read it again at the Institute of Neuroscience in Germany, and it's done the rounds ever since. It is causing a little bit of controversy around the world. It has been through several law courts and stood its ground. So we are getting somewhere. It's a very slow process, but we are getting somewhere. And as I say, the title is up there. And it's copyright free, and it's on the internet. One thing I will mention, in case I forget further on, you must forgive me, I totally lost my voice yesterday, and I rang Peter and said, I don't know if I can make tomorrow, but it came back. And so I've asked to come on first, so if I lose my voice again, at least I've finished. So I was going to say, there is one part of this report. Virtually everything I'm going to talk about today is written and referenced and has been to court. A few years ago, I was the guest of a royal family. The King was an Oxbridge law graduate. And I'm saying this to help you with your research here. And he said, when you come to speak to us, Barrie, he said, I want you to give your text in such a way that when it is written down, I can take it to law. And on this paper, it is reference number 12. And it deals with all of the government issues, all of the children's issues. It's reference number 12. It's a website. Several people wanted it on the internet, and it's reference number 12. It's copyright free. You can download it and take out any paragraphs you want and then take it straight to court. Now, I like to start off, first of all, saying, well, is there any proof? Because there are lots of arguments backwards and forwards. Is there any proof that electromagnetic radiation in the microwave band, which is what we use for communications, is there any proof that it will cause harm? Or is it iffy? Arguments for, arguments against. Is it still in the iffy stage? Well, no, it's not in the iffy stage. Microwaves can kill you. They can cause you harm. They can cause lots of damage to lots of people. There are, to my knowledge, something like now 20,000 peer-reviewed and published research studies into the effects of microwaves causing harm. The World Health Organization, they have recognized electrosensitivity. Our government says it doesn't exist. The school will say it's rubbish. But in fact, the World Health Organization does recognize and describe electrosensitivity. Now, what that means is that the countries that have tested microwaves within their country, they have all found in excess of 3% of the people are sensitive to microwave radiation. It's not everybody, it's around 3%. The Irish Doctors Association, who are Nobel Prize winners, think it may be as high as 15%. So what we are saying with your children is that a minimum. If somebody said to me, how many of our children are at possible risk of ovarian damage or leukemia or whatever, I would say at a minimum 15, at a maximum 75.
And just down the road here, they have their very own Hogwarts. Though a privilege in early life is hardly going to pan out as such over time, if one's health is wrecked due to having spent so much time in an environment contaminated by dangerous levels of microwave radiation, something to which children are particularly susceptible to the dangers of. So please, now that you're aware of his importance, please take in some more of Mr. Trower. He can be found easily via an internet search. And beyond you doing so, we like to think all you parents, grands and grandfathers etc. will get behind Barrie, support him in trying to protect the little people, thus adding some wind to his sails in trying to do so.
There are some 20,000 research papers. There are, to my knowledge, around 8 High Court judgments saying microwaves will cause all of the illnesses that we know, including electrosensitivity, and cause cancer and death. There are some 8 High Court judgments. There are, as far as I know, now 122 epidemiological studies. In other words, where thousands of people have been studied for 10, 15 years, and then it's been published. The insurance industries are writing in exclusion clauses left, right and centre where they will now not cover this sort of thing, which is a very good indication of where we are legally. There are another 29 High Court judgments or High Court cases which have been cleared now to go to court, where people have caught cancer or died or whatever. Another 29 now waiting to go to court. An interesting place to look if you want evidence, the New York Stock Exchange, by law, has to list all of the complaints about the industries. And if you go to the New York Stock Exchange data and look under electromagnetic radiation, electrosensitivity, there are pages upon pages of class actions. In other words, hundreds of people clubbing together to pay legal fees to take the industry to court. They are all there in detail. At one of the legal cases, at one of the High Court cases, it was revealed that if you used a cell phone for 5 hours a day, and that's not very long for today's children. Some children will use a cell phone a lot longer than 5 hours a day. If you use a cell phone for 5 hours a day for 10 years, you are more likely to develop ipsilateral cancer, that is, cancer from the direction of the source of radiation. You are more likely to develop ipsilateral cancer than had you survived the atomic bomb in Japan. The International Agency for Research on Cancer, the World Health Organization's research department, gave a figure not too long ago of roughly how long you need to be exposed, and the average male, how long you need to be exposed before you would develop around a 40% chance of cancer. And it isn't long. It is about, accumulatively, 27 minutes a day. So if you are exposed to a cell phone for 27 minutes a day, you have more than a 40% chance of developing cancer. And that's accumulative. But that's adults. And children are not adults. Are there any children here, by the way? No, okay, I can talk grown up, that's fine. Children are not adults. They're not even miniature versions of adults. They are neurologically and physiologically much different. Their bodies are much more moist, and of course, as you go down into the fetus and the embryo, you get to more moisture even then. Their bodies are more moist. Their biological symptoms are not fully developed, are up and running. And because of their size, radiation is a funny beast, because of their size, they are a nearer size to the multiple of the wavelength, which the physicists here will understand, which means that they act like aerials. And in fact, children can in fact pick up as much as 60% more radiation than an adult. Excuse me, I've got my chamomile tea here. Now, the information is quite horrific. During the Cold War, women were deliberately microwaved. Partly because one country didn't like another country, and they just wanted to microwave women, and the other as an experimental process. And a professor who is a consultant for the communications departments, communications sciences advisor, advisor to the World Health Organization, military advisor, probably the cleverest person walking on the planet at the time. He's no longer with us. He wrote, when he did his research looking into this, of the microwaved exposed women, 47.7% had a miscarriage prior to the 7th week of pregnancy. The dose, or the level of radiation, was 5 microwatts per centimetre squared, which is pretty meaningless to a lot of people. But when I tell you that it is comparable to an ordinary classroom where you have girls tapping away on their Wi-Fi, they are exposed to a military-level dose of microwave irradiation in a classroom. And as I have said, they are, schoolgirls are not women. They are neurologically and physiologically different. Their electrical conductivity, because they have a high water content, actually means they will absorb 10% more microwave irradiation than an adult. So our 47% chance of miscarriage for these girls has now gone up to 57%. But it doesn't stop there. Their mitochondrial DNA from research has also been shown to absorb or be damaged 10 times more easily than other mitochondrial DNA in the body. So we're looking at roughly another 10% of mitochondrial damage for the girls, which now puts our 57% up to 67%. That is the good news. The bad news, as the doctors here will know, is that if you damage the mitochondrial DNA in a child or in a female, and you cause a genetic defect which can be passed through the birth, that is irreparable. So what we are actually saying to our children in the classrooms is we are giving you a known lethal dose of microwave frequency warfare power. You are very, very likely to have a miscarriage or a stillbirth, more likely than not. If, however, you do have a nice birth and you have a healthy child, if the child has damaged mitochondrial DNA, that is irreparable. It then goes on generation to generation to generation for as long as they go. So what we're saying to our school children is, even if you have a healthy birth, we're also giving you a chance of having a genetically damaged child who will have a genetically damaged child who will have a genetically damaged child. So we are actually ruining their chances of having a healthy child as well. That is the seriousness. Now, I was a guest not too long ago at the University of Brighton to give a talk, and one of the professors there, he said that from his experiments through other mammalian species, it was around a 60% genetically damaged miscarriage problems, which will fit in roughly with this. So we're not just talking humans here, we are actually talking all mammalian species. And he thought it was around 60%. So we've gone from our 47% to now around 60. And I can say without a shadow of a doubt that every single school child in this country sitting in front of Wi-Fi for their school career will have at least a 60% chance of miscarriage or stillbirth or genetically damaged child. No shadow of a doubt there. Now, the paper that I wrote for the Irish Doctors Association, this drawing here, I'd like to just run through, if the scientists here will excuse me, I'd like to run through it in sort of Janet and John, so that we can all understand exactly where we're going here. If you could all imagine, please, that you are all 5 years old. You are all 5 years old, and who wouldn't like to be 5 years old again? We're all 5 years old, and you are all girls. And you've walked into your classroom, and the teacher has gone, zonk, there is your computer, there is your Wi-Fi, use it. And unless you leave the school, you have no choice. Your ovaries, which have all of the roughly 400,000 follicles in, they will now be irradiated right the way through your school career until you are something like 18. They will be irradiated for anything up to 5 hours a day. Now imagine that you are around 18 and you are now pregnant. And I've taught many a pregnant student and worked with many a pregnant teacher. You are now all 18 and you are pregnant. You are still sitting in front of your Wi-Fi. You're doing your A-levels or whatever, sitting in front of your Wi-Fi. In the first 100 days in the development of your embryo, and I'm going to assume it's a girl, in the first 100 days in the development of your embryo, your little girl will have all of the 400,000 little ovarian follicles to become eggs, to become children, they will all be in place by the end of the first 100 days of your pregnancy. And for much of that time, some ladies may not even realise or have it confirmed that they're pregnant and would take no precautions. But when you look at these ovarian follicles in your baby, they do not have the immune system that you have. We all have an inbuilt immune system that we developed through our evolvement through caves, living through thunderstorms, electric storms. We actually have an immune system. For the scientists, I'm talking about protein 53, which is 4 protein bonds, and the nuclear core complex, which is 30 strands of protein structures around the cell. So we have protein 53, nuclear core complex. They protect our cells as best as they can from electromagnetic irradiation. The ovarian follicles do not have this. So your baby in the first 100 days of the growth of the embryo does not have protein 53, does not have the nuclear core complex. In other words, what will become the ovarian eggs have absolutely no defence whatsoever against microwaves. Nothing at all. And microwaves are not selective. They will go straight through you, straight through the uterus and straight through the baby. They are not selective. So what you have is a child who has absolutely no defence against microwaves. When your child is born and grows up and becomes pregnant, this is the real danger area, your grandchildren. This is where the price is going to be paid for what you have been put through. And some countries are taking a lot of note of this. When I talk around the world, and I say to them, well, look at it another way. And sometimes I can get this stopped in countries, maybe for the wrong reasons, I don't know, but as long as it's stopped, I don't care what the reasons are. I say to them, assume you're going to lose something like 60% of your newborn children. The mathematics is relatively simple. After just 60 years, 3 generations roughly, and I say to the countries, to the governments, I say after around 60 years, you will be down to about 1/8 of your healthy children's population. Those are the children that are exposed. Of the exposed children, you will be down to 1/8 of your healthy children's population. And my next question to them is, how are you going to run your country? Where is your infrastructure going to come from to run your health service, drive your trains, your buses, train your doctors? The only way you will survive is by having mass immigration, which may or may not be a good thing, it depends on your perspective. But you are going to be down to just 1/8 of your healthy children's population. That normally does it. Now, the sad thing is that all of this was not only known, but predicted and written about before all of this was even made and put out into schools. Our government knew that if you put the Wi-Fi in front of the children in our schools, or expose anybody to cell towers or Tetra or whatever, they knew that this would happen. I know that we knew because I was told and I was in the government. So I know that we knew, and it's in writing as well. And in fact, it was written by the World Health Organization advisor. Effects from exposure to RF radiation in certain populations can cause reproductive effects, increased spontaneous abortion, increased incidence of childhood and other cancers. It couldn't be more plain than that. All governments read that. The top secret documents that you weren't allowed to see, and I don't know if they're still top secret, I don't actually care. The Naval Medical Research Institute, in those days the military did all of the research. The Naval Medical Research Institute, this one here, that was published, they actually warn everybody, and they studied 2,000 different research papers here, and they warn everybody from this of menstrual disruption and severe damage to fetal development. And this is entitled Biological and Clinical Manifestations Attributed to Microwave and Radio Frequency Radiation.
When was that?
Sorry?
What year?
Can I carry on? And it's all referenced in there. Even more, what I find to be ashamed of, the World Health Organization called a conference in 1973. Called a conference, and in it they listed everything I've just been talking about: reproductive function going haywire, and everything I've been talking about. And it was classified as top secret, and kept secret from the rest of the world. So even the World Health Organization knew that this was coming and knew what to expect, but it was classified, and you weren't allowed to know. And you may still not be allowed to know, I don't know. The Defense Intelligence Agency this is the American government, wrote to all Western governments that if the more advanced nations of the West, which is basically Europe, are strict in the enforcement of exposure standards, it would be unfavourable to industrial output and military function. In other words, what the American government are asking us to do is have an exposure level that lies to the general population. Because if you're told the truth, nobody would ever pick up a cell phone or use a computer. Nothing would ever get off the ground. So, by industrial output is, of course, profit. So the American government asked all of us in Europe to basically mislead the general populations. And in their document, they list a whole range of illnesses, everything to do with neurological damage, physiological damage. They've listed all of the illnesses that you can expect from this, but they have asked you basically to keep it secret. And we agreed, along with 42% of other countries, we agreed to abide by the American request, and we still do to this day. So what we came up with was a safety level that said, if you do not feel too warm in 6 minutes, then everything will be deemed safe. That is it. So, provided you don't feel too warm in 6 minutes, it is deemed safe. And that is the safety level for 42% of the planet, by the request of the American government. For no other reason than profit. That is it. The clever part of this, in terms of government scientists and advisors, is that our heat sensors are generally on the outside of our body, on our skin. Microwaves work from the inside out. So, in fact, it would be impossible for you to feel too warm after 6 minutes, because you don't have the heat sensors to detect it. So what the government have actually done, they have set a safety limit whereby you can never detect it and you can never take them to court, because you can't detect it in this country. So they have made a bomb-proof excuse to get away with murder, which is what they're doing, for no other reason than money. Now, some of the research carried out, the industry scientists and the government scientists at one scientific meeting said we can alter the behaviour of cells, tissue, and cause up to 6 times higher fetal mortality and birth defects, as if it was something to be proud of from the research. The mobile telecommunications industry itself carried out a very exhaustive scientific study, and their conclusion, it can be concluded that electromagnetic fields with frequencies in the mobile telecommunications range do play a role in the development of cancer. That is the industry talking about its own product. Direct damage on the DNA synthesis and repair mechanisms. DNA synthesis is, of course, the building of protein bodies and is essential for healthy children. International Commission for Non-Ionising Radiation Protection that we follow, known as the ICNIRP certificate, that we follow. They published a report on this, and it actually says, and this is our government writing this, because our government sit on that board. This is what we have written about electrosensitivity and everything else. It says, this is page 546 of the copy I've got. For example, children, the elderly, and some chronically ill people might have a lower tolerance for one or more forms of this radiation than the rest of the population. It may be necessary to develop separate guidelines. In other words, if you're electrosensitive, you should have a separate guideline for your near transmitter. Some guidelines may still not provide adequate protection for certain sensitive individuals. It then goes on to say here, and I'll paraphrase this and just summarise it, that the person responsible for the transmitter, this is how I read this legal piece here, the person responsible for the transmitter should review scientific literature and determine appropriate reduction factors. In other words, if you have a transmitter near you, and it is causing you harm, the landowner who signed for the transmitter, according to our regulations, should recognise that you are ES and should adjust the level to the point where it is not affecting you. I mean, here, it goes up like Meccano and bits like Lego added on, and nobody really gives a damn what's coming out. But if we follow this, then the person with the transmitter should actually take responsibility and turn it down. And that applies to schools, colleges, universities, factories, everywhere. So the person who is responsible for the transmitter is required to read scientific literature and adjust the level appropriately so it is not causing harm. If you're sitting there thinking, he's probably a nice old man, but mad as a box of frogs, no government would ever deliberately harm 60% of its children or cause anything like this. I'll just read a little list of where the government knew in advance this would cause birth defects, cancers, genetic damage, whatever. All of the, and some of these were taken to court before they were even released to the public, but the industry lawyers, as they do, won the day. We have smoking, asbestos, bovine spongiform encephalopathy, or BSE, mad cow disease. Lead in petrol, that went to court. The experiment in the 1960s, service personnel, emergency service personnel and military service personnel are favourites for all sorts of experiments from Porton Down and other bodies, because service personnel They're monitored all of the time for their health, their work routine, their diet, everything is monitored. So they make ideal subjects without their knowledge. Lots of countries do it, and we certainly do. In the 1960s, 20,000 of our service personnel were given what they were told were flu injections. Nothing to do with flu, they were all sorts of biological chemical cocktails. Most people died an extremely agonizing death. But that was carried out with the blessing of the government, Ministry of Defence, Porton-Down, and it's certainly not the only one. Thalidomide, of course, Agent Orange, which is sprayed over enemy countries for the same reason. At one governmental meeting where there was feedback from some of these, it was reported, students will understand the nature of radio frequency bioeffects research, including human and animal studies. Students will be familiar with current state of knowledge on potential health effects such as cancer, memory loss, and birth defects. So not only do they know it's happening, but they're monitoring it. They're not turning a blind eye, they're saying, well, this is what we're actually getting. Looking through the research, in the human body, there are around 4,500 different biological structures known to be affected and reported on by microwave irradiation. In a child, it's around 4,050. The risk, general risk to children, I talked about protein synthesis. All of the papers say that protein synthesis is affected, which is basically building the body. Where it is involved, the blood-brain barrier in the developmental stage of a child, which is it's sort of a net that goes around the brain. The tissues are in other parts of the body as well, but it's a sort of a fishing net around the brain. And it keeps everything that should be in, and stops anything going out. It stops infections or anything that shouldn't go in the brain. It requires 18 months to be fully developed. So any child exposed to microwave radiation under the age of 18 months can have their blood-brain barrier damaged, and of course that can lead to any sort of neurological problem later on in life. The myelin sheath, if you like, the insulating sheet around our nerves, has 122 layers of fat laid down one at a time, and takes 22 years to develop. So again, our children that are happily spending 5-6 hours a day are actually affecting their myelin sheaths in the body. That can lead to any muscular problem, communication problem later on in life. And that's not developed until they're 22. The brain, when you see children wandering around with smartphones stuck to the side of their heads, the brain requires 20 years minimum to be fully developed. So children are irradiating a brain that is still trying to grow. Our bones, with the bone marrow, that of course helps us with our immune system. Our bones take 26 years until they are fully developed. And bone, for some reason, is particularly sensitive to microwave. Probably because the microwaves can go in, mess up the marrow, and then there is the knock-on effect. Not too long ago, a survey was carried out across Europe, just a snap survey across Europe to look at how much damage was being done to children. And I've referenced it in this paper, it's in reference number 12. Across Europe, in the schools, they found 200 leukemia or cancer clusters in schools in a SNAP research right across Europe at that time. They're still carrying on, we're still getting them, the reports are coming in. But they found 200 leukemia or cancer clusters, including staff, in schools, which are attributed to the transmitter in or around the school. Hoping to sort this out, UNICEF, the children's charity, which had Audrey Hepburn and others as its spokespersons, I think nobody can call UNICEF a sort of money-grabbing event that doesn't do any good. It's a highly respected children's charity. They decided, with no disrespect to the scientists here, to grab the world's top microwave specialists, which I would agree, Professor Yuri Grigoryov of the Russian Institute of Nuclear and Atomic Physics. They grabbed the world's top scientist and they commissioned a study on children. And they found an 85% increase in central nervous system disorders, a 30% increase in epilepsy, an 11% increase in what they call mental retardation. Not a phrase I would use, but that's their phrase. And an 82% increase in blood immune disorders and risk to the fetus. Supporting this document, a retired captain from military intelligence wrote, "No informed person can question that microwave weapons exist or that the long-term, low-intensity electromagnetic radiation emitted by pulsed microwave devices are injurious and to, and not just humans, but all life forms." In other words, microwaves will harm every living thing on this planet, including plants. Of the specific frequencies the Soviets in particular experimented with, and whose lethality they now fully understand, one stands out: 2.4 gigahertz. In other words, Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi was used as a weapons frequency, and we are putting it in front of children. Other people supporting this, there are now, I have a list of some 81 countries or organisations trying to get Wi-Fi away from children and pregnant women. A list of 81 countries or huge organisations. The Parliamentary Assembly, Council of Europe, wrote, ban all mobile phones, DECT phones, Wi-Fi systems from classrooms and schools. Ban. That's the Council of Europe. There was a legal challenge, excuse me, there was a legal challenge to the word ban, and they had to change it to a wired system is preferred. But the meaning is the same. The Professor Grigoriev wrote, again, do not use wireless broadband systems including Wi-Fi in schools, educational establishments, pregnant women. The Executive Committee of the American Academy of Environmental Medicine wrote, do not add to the burden of public health by installing blanket wireless internet connections. Just Wi-Fi everywhere. The American Academy of Pediatricians, 60,000 of them. 60,000 pediatricians. This is their statement. This is an unprecedented exposure with unknown outcome on the health and reproductive potential of a generation. Harvard Medical School, again, have said cancer, neurological disease, reproductive disorders, immune dysfunction, and electromagnetic hypersensitivity can result from this. That's Harvard Medical School. And again, here, these are published in the last couple of months. It's still going on. Pediatric neurologist. Pregnant women deserve to know that wireless radiation can have an impact on the developing brain. We are seeing alarming increases in the number of children diagnosed with neurological disorders over the past decade. A similar message has come from arguably one of the cleverest hospitals on the planet, the Women's Cottage Hospital in Toronto. They are saying the same thing. And another appeal just launched. 190 scientists from 39 nations have published over 2,000 relevant studies and have sent them to the World Health Organization as an appeal. People are trying. I was asked to stop for around 12 o'clock, just for 5 minutes. In 2002, 36,000 physicians and scientists signed what was known as the Freiberger Appeal.
Could you say it again, please?
The Freiberger Appeal, 36,000 physicians and scientists. It's all written down, it's all in there. 10 years later, 2012, it was relaunched. So if we look collectively at the world's top experts, we have somewhere in the region of 100,000 of the cleverest people in the world, 100,000 plus, saying, for goodness sake, get this away from children, protect your pregnant women, take control of this industry. And to my knowledge, about 58% of the world is either taking action or trying to take action or looking into it or doing something. We are not. We are putting as much Wi-Fi into schools as we possibly can, as fast as we can. Excuse me. The government announced very recently that Dartmoor and Exmoor were to be blanketed with Wi-Fi as fast as possible. It was on the news. The Prime Minister has said his holiday village, where he spends his holiday, needs to be blanketed with Wi-Fi so he can use it whilst he's on holiday, which says a lot for how far we're going to get. So in this country, again, if you don't feel too warm by the senses that you don't have inside your body anyway, in 6 minutes, then the industry has permission to run riot across the country. And that's where we are. I was asked to stop at 12. I'll go on to pulsing in a second. If anybody would like the loo or a quick break, we'll stop just for 5 minutes. Okay? Now, I'd like to describe roughly what happens in Janet and John terms, what goes on when the microwaves go into your body with the pulse frequencies that they have. They all have pulse or modulation frequencies in them. And the easiest way to think about this, if you imagine yourself bouncing on a trampoline. You will bounce at a steady rhythm. Everything in your body has its own steady rhythm. You will bounce at a steady rhythm. If a 70-stone man jumps on the same trampoline and bounces at his rhythm, you will have no choice but to bounce at his rhythm, because you cannot fight the energy. That is called entrainment. Every time microwaves go into the body, wherever it goes, that part of the body, particularly the brain, is entrained. In other words, it is bouncing at a different rate than its functioning rate. It's been published in the Lancet that a child using a cell phone for just 2 minutes, their brain will be entrained for 2 hours afterwards, which means their brain will not function properly for 2 hours. If after 2 hours they go to the playground and make another call, and then another, you can have children in this country whose brains are actually never, ever normal. The entrainment, when the 70-stone gentleman jumps off the trampoline, you will continue to bounce at his level until you can slow it down and then readjust it to your level. That is called long-term potentiation. Long-term potentiation from radiation effects can take 6 weeks to get you back to normal. Studies have shown that. So if you are electrosensitive or hypersensitive and you're in a really bad way, what you really need to do is go somewhere, which is easier said than done, where there is no microwave radiation or whatever it is that's causing your harm. Go somewhere and you could be there for up to 6 weeks before your body will be fully recovered. In terms of vibrational frequencies, for the physicists here I'm talking about cyclotronic and circadian resonant frequencies in the body, sodium, chlorine, calcium, potassium, and so on. It has been found from very good research from India that women have 13 different, to date, circadian resonant frequencies than men. Now, what that means is you could have a man sitting in the house and a lady sitting in the house, and one of them could be saying, why do I always hear this at this time of night? Or why do I taste a spoon as if it in my mouth? Or I get so itchy? Or I get pains everywhere. Why aren't you feeling it? Or why am I hearing just this continuous annoying noise? And the rest of the family are saying, oh, for goodness sake, you're going bonkers, go and see a GP or something. Whereas, in fact, you are genuine. It's just that they are not tuned in. And there are 13 of these which have been listed to date. I'm not going to go through all of the medical names and all of the complicated bits here, because if the doctors want to know it, I'll happily talk to them over the lunch period. But research has also shown, and this is used in brainwashing, and I know because I've learned about it, there are chemicals, a whole list of them. There are chemicals produced in the brain, or behavioural traits. They require a current, an electrical current, of 2 milliamps to make that part of the brain produce that chemical or that action. 2 milliamps. It is not unusual if you are using a cell phone with mirrors, windows, reflective surfaces, you're in a vehicle, a train, a car, somebody else is using something near you, it is not unusual to have as much as 34 milliamps generated in your brain. 17 times this. It's not to say that you will get 17 times this chemical or this action, because the body can't do that. But it does mean you can get a combination of some, depending on the angle, the power, lots of other variables. It does mean you can get some. And things they can induce, which are used in brainwashing techniques, are the same feelings in the body as morphine, marijuana, there's your addictiveness, hunger. I'm not talking about hunger where, gosh, we're going to have a sandwich in 3/4 of an hour. I'm talking about hunger where you are going to commit a crime for food. Hopelessness, suicidal tendencies, one of the most common symptoms of microwave sickness, ES, whatever it's called now, is suicidal tendencies. I was asked to go and speak to the full council in Wales big brand new council hall. I looked at the topography of the land, namely the hills. I looked at where the towers were going to be placed. I could visualise the standing waves and the houses. And I said to the council, and it's on record, I said, if you go ahead with this, you will have more childhood problems than you could ever deal with. The place was Bridgend. The government scientist, when I finished speaking, patted me on the back, smiled as if I were 3 years old, and went out. The place was Bridgend. That is a very, very common symptom. And oddly enough, the person may be here, I don't know. But I had a call from Bridgend saying they are still going on, but not reported. I sent evidence to the inquiry. I said, I told you about this. Here is the proof. Nothing. It is still down as an unknown phenomenon. The other symptom you can get from entrainment of the brain is anger. Very common. It's listed in virtually every government paper, severe neurological anger. If it's mixed with a pulse frequency of 6.6, that will induce sexual violence. And there are communications instruments that do pulse at 6.6. That will induce sexual violence. The insula in the brain is an interesting one, used for torturing people, but accidentally you can pick it up anywhere. That will give you nightmares and hallucinations. And what I find the most interesting, especially in terms of electrosensitivity, is a phenomena called limbic kindling. It's been published and written about since 1976. 1976, the papers were published, limbic kindling. The doctors will laugh when I describe this. It's a bit like a Mickey Mouse ear facing your phone in the brain, that sort of shape. And the best way I can describe what I read, because I'm not a medical doctor, the best way I can describe what I read and look up is limbic kindling. There are 5 or 6 papers on this now. It's sort of a, I want to get your body out of this situation organ. If the limbic system picks up something that is irritating or annoying your body, electromagnetic radiation is one of them. There are chemicals as well that will trigger it. Sound can trigger it. The smell of anaesthetic can trigger it. If it picks up something your body doesn't like, it will send messages around your body to try and cause various pains or aches or feelings or sensations through your sense organs. It will do something to make you think, I don't like being here, I've got to get out of it. And that may be a contributing part of electrosensitivity, hypersensitivity, will be limbic kindling. I don't know. But it matches, it ticks all the boxes. But with chemicals, it will do the same. It will make you, it's for the doctors, it's the same symptoms as lead arsenide poisoning. It will give you really bad symptoms that can really go anywhere. Bad stomach cramps, feeling sick, pains, aches, burns. And it will bring these sensations on to get you out of that area, and then it will switch off again. It obviously has other jobs, but that's one of them. all of this was known and documented. It really started in 1950. A scientist, Jose Delgado, Yale University, he was really the pioneer of this for humans and animals. And he made a very famous statement. He said, all moods and emotions are possible. In other words, in any animal or any person, with his entrainment of the brain, by either putting waves in or implants, he said, all emotions and moods are possible. Very recent letters or studies concerning government advisors, and this is where our problem is. Our problem is with government advisors. In fact, I think about 42% of the Western world is being held to ransom with cancers and stillbirths and everything I'm talking about. About 42% of the Western world is being held to ransom by just 19 people. But the problem is, they are in incredibly powerful positions. And that is the problem. A professor, naming one of them, wrote a letter to the Attorney General of the USA. And I won't read his whole letter. But he has likened this government advisor to Joseph Mengele during the Second World War. He says, this constitutes a serious attack on human dignity, degradation of the life of millions. And a medical doctor wrote that to the Attorney General of the United States to say that there is really no difference to what is going on here and making these people suffer, you suffer, as experiments in the Second World War. I was in Taunton here several years ago, and I'm not afraid to name names. They can take me to court any day they like. In fact, I'd welcome it. I was at a conference here concerning all this, and the government advisor, Sir Laurie Chalice, was speaking on behalf of the communications industry and the government, and I went up to him at the lunch break and I said, look, have you any idea of the pain and suffering, the misery that you are actually going to cause by bringing this through? And I never forgot what he said to me. He said, it's not so much as what he said, as how he said it. He said, what's wrong with that? His exact words to me, what's wrong with that? And that is one of our government advisors. What's wrong with that? I was at a conference at the police station, Middlebank Police Station, Exeter, the big police headquarters. And Sir, no, he's not Sir yet, maybe, I don't know. Laurie Chalice, another government advisor, was there. And he was talking to all of the police, I was there, about Tetra. And he had a big chart behind him, and he said, everything from here is dangerous. Everything from here is safe. Tetra was there. He said, cancers and illnesses cannot be caused by microwaves below thermal levels. Governments produced documents, which I've shown, and their first opening line is microwaves below thermal levels will cause. Colin Blakemore was 25 years out of date with his research when he said that. Now, if there are two of our top country's advisors, one is 25 years out of date, and the other one says, well, yeah, you know, this is what we're up against. This is rather a naughty one. This is Health Protection Agency study into electrosensitivity. The signatories at the back, there are 10 signatories at the back. I know of all of them. I've certainly met some of them. None of them are stupid. Their conclusion regarding electrosensitivity or hypersensitivity is there is no consistent scientific evidence. That is their conclusion. Now, to a non-scientist, that might mean, well, you can't actually find any evidence or something. To a scientist, no consistent evidence in a biological study which would normally follow a well-known distribution curve. If you study the mating habits of jellyfish and the growth of that tree out there, you will still get the same distribution curve. What it actually means is, and it's the easiest way to explain it, if I took, in a thought experiment, all of you, all of your families, all of their relatives, and all of their relatives, and all of their friends, and I said, we're going to do an experiment. I'm going to give you all 10 cigarettes a day and 2 pints of beer. And I want you to smoke the 10 cigarettes and drink the 2 pints of beer. This is a study. At the start of the study, there would be deaths, illnesses, people very, very sick. With no disrespect, this is your electrosensitive people. As the test went on, there would be more and more illnesses. It would reach a plateau, and then it would go down, and at the other end, there would be people saying, this is a brilliant study, Barry. Look, any chance of lengthening it or giving us a bit more? And that is the nature of human beings. We are not homogeneous. We are not all the same. In other words, there would be no consistent evidence. Some would be very sick. Some would be worse over a time. Some would be worse. There would be some not so bad. Some not so bad, and some would not feel anything at all. In other words, the conclusion to this would be there will be no consistent evidence. So, by writing for electrosensitivity, no consistent evidence, what they're saying is, we know it's going to cause you harm, but we can write this because some people won't be harmed. And that's how they get away with it. They have fooled everybody. And this is one of their lines on how to fool everybody. Now, oddly enough, as I walked in, Dr. Tressida said to me on my way in, it said, it's a very lonely and isolated place where you are, isn't it? And I said, I know. And I know people like me who get the abuse that you get on the internet, and you're just called about everything that you can be called, and insulted in every way you can possibly be insulted. But I say this just as a guide to people who, two have come up to me and said, what can we do? I say this as a warning and as a guide. Now, many years ago, Sir Richard Dole, one of my universities is Exeter. Sir Richard Dole was either the Chancellor or working there with the Chancellor. When I was looking into this, Exeter University rang me up and said, don't ever contact us, step on our campus or talk to us ever again. Universities require government grants and government money for research. They said, as far as we are concerned, you don't exist. I went to the Open University to carry on a bit more research. Dr. Jamie Harle said, don't talk to me again. Your work is too political. Finished. Don't come here. My MP, I saw him 6 years ago, he's still there, and I said to him on his very first surgery, when he was elected 6 years ago, I'm down at near Newton Abbot, I saw him and I said, there are two things. I need to see the Prime Minister. I'm not being presumptuous here. I've met 40 royals and prime ministers and people all over the world. I said, I want to talk to the Prime Minister about what is a thalidomide in the making. He said, okay. And there was another matter that was nothing to do with this. I said, this is essential. I talked to the Prime Minister. Within a day or two, I got a letter back saying the Prime Minister is too busy to discuss this. I rang up and questioned whether he'd actually asked the Prime Minister. No reply. I have since been banned from meeting my MP now for 6 years. He will not meet me. It even hit the press. Physicist, I'm stopped from seeing my MP. I wrote to every government department. They said an MP is within his rights not to see somebody if he doesn't want to. So I have no educational aid, I have no government aid, and when somebody said to me, what can we do? I'm just saying, be prepared for this if you start stepping into this arena. And people have lost their jobs. I have known people phone me up saying, if I read out this statement, the industry has said they will take me to court. If I lose, they will recover their costs. About £80,000. That's my house. So, by all means, if you want to do something, do it, but be incredibly careful. I get lots and lots of phone calls, and I find them immensely distressed. I'm distressed now, just thinking about them. Could you read it? I can't read them. Please. I can't do that.
Okay, this is the first one. My daughter has...
Speak up.
So it closer.
Just pull it down.
Okay. Is that better? Yeah, I'm seeing myself now. That's better. Okay. My daughter has just died and I'm holding her hand. She's just had her 11th birthday and she was number 11 to die since a transmitter for Wi-Fi was put near her and others' desks. Another quote, my child is one of several with cancer, birth genetic problems. These only started after the transmitter was turned on, and my worries are twofold and take every second of my life. Will my child ever marry or find a partner and be happy? What will happen when I die? I know I will die worrying, regardless of who is to blame. It's me, the mother who carries the guilt and the responsibility.
Thank you. we had a case here of 11 children with leukemia in a school, and the mother got the MP to bring it up in Parliament. It took 18 months. It took 18 months to get this into Parliament. The MP went through the life of every child, all 11. When the MP sat down, the minister stood up and said, "We are within European safety guidelines," and sat down. That's it. In other words, if you don't feel too warm in 6 minutes, having leukemia is irrelevant. So, now, some people have said, what can they do? Well, I do these talks with a hope. I hope that there is somebody that will know somebody that I can talk to. In some countries it works. What I ask is, if you can find somebody who has the power in this country to say, I know just what I can do to bring this to the notice of the press, the government, whatever, I can call a press conference. I will deal with this. If you know somebody that is prepared to give me an hour, I can go to them, I can tell them all of this in an hour, explain the problem, and what we need is somebody who is immensely famous to say, listen, UK, you are overlooking the next thalidomide. I want this to go to everybody so everybody knows what's happening. That does work in some countries, and when it works, it really works. But here, I've tried, I can't get through to Parliament, I can't get through to any academic institution. I tried writing to the Queen a couple of times, but there was no reply. And I thought the no reply was quite interesting, because I mean, I can remember the Queen's coronation, and I've followed her ever since. And I've heard lots of things said about the royal family and the Queen, good and bad. There's one thing I've never heard. I have never heard anybody say the Queen is bad-mannered. If she receives a letter, she replies. My letters didn't have a reply, which means somebody in Buckingham Palace is screening what goes to her. And I think that's quite important. Now, when I go to countries, I am invariably on some sort of news night program, radio or television or both. And I issue a challenge, and I've zigzagged all the way to Australia and all the way back. And I've made a challenge to every single country that I've been in. And it is this. I say, I want to face your top government scientist live on your programme. And I want to ask just one simple question. Just one. What is the safe level of pulsed microwave irradiation for the first 100 days in the development of the embryo? And it is a question you can ask any person who is thinking of having Wi-Fi in or whatever, what is the safe level for the first 100 days in the development of the embryo? To date, and I've been doing this for 17, 18 years, to date, not one person in any country, not one, will come and face me live and answer that question. And I know why they won't answer, because there isn't one. And if somebody says to you, and you ask it, oh, we've got this paper that has been peer-reviewed by 5 of our professors, and it's got gold all around it, and it's bound, and it says they're going to be safe, you say, thank you very much, I will write down the title of the paper, I will obtain a copy, I will send it to Nature Publications, I've put the address in my paper. Nature is probably the world's most leading scientific journal, and you can send it to Nature and say, will this protect my unborn child for the rest of its life? Is there enough proof in this paper? And to date, nobody has produced a paper that can be sent to Nature. So, when you say, what can I do? Find me somebody to talk to, if you can. Or, excuse me, or send a copy of my paper to somebody and say, can you talk to this bloke or do whatever. That is what you can do. I mean, sometimes it has outstanding results. Why I asked if there were children here, something that horrifies me immensely. I'm going to show a photograph, a medical photograph. If you don't like looking at cancer, look away. This is the breast of a young lady who tucked her cell phone into her bra for convenience sake. There are some 64, I've got them here, there are some 64 published and peer-reviewed papers on breast cancer from low-level microwave irradiation. An enormous amount of study has gone into this. Things you can do to try and prevent it is, if you carry a cell phone, remember even when they're off, some of them can be turned on. People don't realise that, remotely. Some of them, if you have a cell phone and it's totally off, some of them have a chip in. So if somebody over there is trying to make a call to somebody over there and the distance is too great, your phone can be turned on, pick the call up and relay it. And you can be walking about as a transmitter. People don't realise that. Not to carry a cell phone in a shoulder bag next to the mammary cells. And another study that came out underneath bras, I didn't know this for 42 years, which probably said something about my marriage. Under bras, there's a metal thing. Now, that's in the shape of a parabola. And what the metal will do is absorb the microwaves like spoon in a microwave oven. Will absorb the microwaves and then refocus them like a parabolic mirror into a small area of the cells. Now, why breast tissue is so sensitive to microwaves, I don't have the knowledge, the medical knowledge to understand. But it is. One thing that is horrifying me now, and is being handed out in schools all over the world, including this country, there are four manufacturers now producing lapel badges. They go across the breast in a school blazer. They are microwave transmitters. They transmit, depending on which one, every 20 to 40 seconds. So you're getting a surge every 20 to 40 seconds. The idea behind it is that the child can be monitored on a screen every second of the day where they are. And the selling point is, if your child is abducted, we will know exactly where your child is. But what you have is a badge which cannot be turned off. They wear it home, it transmits all of the time. They wear it to school. It cannot be turned off. Across a schoolgirl's breast, transmitting all through her school career. I would hazard a guess that 99% of those girls are going to develop breast cancer in that breast once they are old enough.
Which country was that?
Sorry?
Which country?
In this country. They're all over the world. The firms are mostly American and Canadian, but they're in this country.
What's the gadget called again?
Sorry?
What is that gadget called?
It doesn't have a name. It's just a microwave transmitter. And of course it saves registration. A teacher doesn't have to call out names because you just look at a screen and they're all the dots are there. Now, I'll be finishing in just 10 minutes. Just a few statistics from around the world and this country to do with children, and the average length of time now for a child before cancer is almost imminent is between 2.5 and 2.8 years of continual use. They are then more likely to develop cancer than not. 2.5 to 2.8 years. There are studies here that are showing a 400% increase in childhood cancers. And China, one country, has recorded a 3,000% increase in parotid gland, side of the face cancers in children. A 3,000% increase. In this country, there is a 59.6% increase in brain tumours, according to national statistics. It is now, according to the office, the leading cause of childhood death from cancer in this country.
Is that brain tumours just for children?
Yes. To combat these statistics, 40, and adults now, I'm talking about adults now, 40,000 brain tumour cases are now missing from the official statistics every year. They've taken 40,000 out. They are being re-diagnosed as endocrine cancers or some other type of cancer. Although it's a part of the brain, technically it's not grey matter or white matter, so technically you could say it's not brain cancer. But even with 40,000 coming out, we are still getting more than we ever could. childhood suicides are going up by 4% every single year. And that's a colossal number on the numbers we have. A physician in Plymouth, I won't read his name, I've got his letter, I won't read his name on camera, actually questioned why the number of cancer cases he was seeing did not match the statistics. I, on his behalf, wrote to, this was Plymouth, I wrote to, who's the chap I wrote to? Here, I've got my letter here. The Office of the Director of Public Health, Plymouth City Council, and I sent him all of the data he needed to know. And I said, look, your own physician is saying, why are your statistics wrong? Here is the proof that they are wrong. What can we do about it? I never had a reply. I wrote back, I never had a reply. I rang his office yesterday and they said, he doesn't work here anymore, he's now working as a government advisor. I just want to mention briefly the international, I've got to get, the IARC classifies radio frequency electromagnetic fields, International Agency for Research on Cancer. In other words, things that are in this level that are probable or possible causes of cancer. In the same level as the Wi-Fi, we put in classrooms, these items are in the same. And I say to countries when I go, when they say to you as you go through immigration, what are you going to do in this country? If I say to them, I'm going to your nearest school and I'm going to go into the classroom and I'm going to put lead, DDT, benzene, the smell from gasoline, HIV type 2, chloroform, mercury. I'm going to release those into your classroom for the children to play with. I would be expected to be thrown in chains and deported on the nearest aeroplane. But they are all in the same category as Wi-Fi, all of them. And somebody, usually from the government, says, aha, but so is coffee. Get out of that one. And my response is, have you read, sir, the paper on coffee that you are throwing at me? No. Well, I have. And it isn't anything to do with your morning cup of Nescafe. It's to do with the Mediterranean type thick coffee, the very strong, that you may drink 20 cups of over 30 years. It's the irritant to the stomach. It's that coffee. So if you get challenged with that, you'll know where you are. And finally, why are we not hearing any of what I'm talking about over the television, especially the BBC, over the newspapers? If you look, a lot of the people who actually own television companies own newspaper companies. And the BBC has joined Google to give every school child in year 11 years old, year 7, every school child a programming computer device that is adaptable to Wi-Fi, compatible with Wi-Fi. Every single 11-year-old in the UK is to be given a Wi-Fi enabled computer device by the BBC. Everyone. Google are in partnership. Google are also in partnership with 5 other companies. They are going to launch around 2.25 million Wi-Fi transmitters globally with drones, balloons, low-level satellites, 2.25 million. They want to totally blanket saturate the planet with Wi-Fi. So anywhere you go on the planet, you will receive Wi-Fi. So when we have the BBC in league with all of the, indirectly or directly, with the telecommunication companies, this is why we are not really getting much from the BBC. And in fact, I've done hundreds of television and radio programmes, and those of you that have done radio and television programmes will appreciate that when you, before they put you on air, you have to sign a release consent. And generally they get you to sign it before you do the interview, and then they disappear in edit. The only time from all of these years, the only time the editing has been deliberately wrong, when I watched the programme and I said, I didn't say that, like that. Those are not my words. It was Country File. John Craven interviewed me for Country File. It went off, I signed the release for John Craven, it went off, and I watched it and I said, that's not how I said that. And it's the only time that my editing has been deliberately not true. And that's with the BBC. Right, I've just got a couple of minutes. I just want to finish on one last thing. We need, on this planet, I'm just going to talk globally, we need 16,000 tonnes of fresh food produced every day. 80% of that, 12,500 tonnes a day, has to be pollinated by arthropods, or creepy crawlies to most people. All animal species are affected by microwaves, all of them. This is what we are risking in terms of planetary science. The carbon dioxide generated by all of these cell phones and everything, cell towers, it's about 110 million tonnes into the atmosphere every year, more than that now, the equivalent of about 29 million cars on the road every year. Any scientist will tell you carbon dioxide into the atmosphere will mix with the water vapour and produce carbonic acid. That comes down into the oceans. This is a dangerous time. In the oceans we have little creatures called coccolithopores. They do whatever coccolithopores enjoy doing, and I'm very happy for them. But they produce, in what they do, they produce a compound called dimethyl sulfide. That is released into the atmosphere. That is the only substance known on the planet that can be used in cloud formation. The message is very simple. We cut down the amounts that people use on all of this communication structure and cut down the carbon dioxide, or we lose our clouds and the consequences. And I'd like to finish just with 3 minutes. Would that be all right? And I can sum all this up in just 3 minutes. Oh, I got a smack hand from the canteen lady who's watching me. I was the guest of a king, and he said, will you come and talk to me in the garden, Barry? And I said, okay. The table was laid out and for a salad and that. And he leaned forward and he said, in 50 years, I will have lost the viability of my country. And it sums up everything I've been talking about. And I wished that I was the one that was clever enough to think this up, but I wasn't. And he said, all of these transmitters are in. We have the electrosensitive people, hypersensitive people, children, everyone's being ill. I'm losing my workforce. On top of that, I have to import the medicines to treat them. On top of that, imagine that I've got 10 million people in my country, probably about right, and imagine that they all have cell phones, which again is probably right. And imagine that the daily bill for their cell phone is just $1 American. That's 10 million American dollars going out of my country every day to the industries. Admittedly, they run a few shops and a few advertising things, but most of that money is going out of my country, and anyone that can work a piggy bank will soon tell you that you're going to go bankrupt. I have lost my ants. Now, ants might be a pest over here, but there they crawl over the plants, they keep other insects off of the fruit-bearing plants. And he said that means I'm going to develop scurvy because we're not getting enough vitamin C. And when you start adding all this together, along with the miscarriages, stillbirths, he said, I am going to lose the viability of my country within 50 years at its current rate. But the very people that are causing the trouble, and the Americans are the main contributors here, he said, the very people causing the trouble are the first to ring me up and say, can we give you aid? But he says there's a price for this aid. The aid is very good and very generous, but they want land rights. They want mining rights. They want to move in and stay here. And he said, when you start looking at all this, this is where this industry is going. Whether it's deliberate to take over the world, I don't know, and I'm certainly not clever enough to work it out. But this is the whole picture of where we are in this country and the world. Thank you.